Okay, everyone, thanks for joining our monthly webinar series. This time we're going to be going over some new features in Flogo. All right, so we're going to go over the new features in Flogo. I also want to cover do review of the marketplace in case you missed some of the information on that. And we'll give you some resources you can refer to. So pretty straightforward. We have a bunch of great new features within Flogo. The first one is the ability to receive and send a multi-part form data. So now with Flogo, you'll be able to both receive attachments as part of the receive HTTPS message trigger and also send them as part of the HTTP call activity, right? So you'll be able to both receive binary data and then send that off. We have a new activity for Execute JavaScript. Also now, when you're doing the designer in Flogo, it's going to be easier to move things around. You'll be able to move entire branches within a flow. We have a new connector for WebSockets, both on the server side and the client side. We also have some connector enhancements. And additionally, the product team has done a new upgrade of all of our examples in GitHub. So a lot of good stuff over there, both in terms of some sample flow, some sample connectors, some sample code. So you really want to head over there, and really great way to supplement the documentation that we have. So for multi-part form data, when you're creating a receive HTTP message trigger, right, you'll have this new option for request type, and then you can select form data here. All right. And when you do that, you are going to want to sync. You're going to want to sure to sync the output settings and input to the sync it so that it'll show up in your triggers. Also, you'll be able to move branches in the flow. So now you'll be able to drag and drop very easily. So once you have a flow with some branches, when you drag and drop the branch, you just pick up the branch, drag it, you can move it around, and then you'll be able. It brings all of the blocks within all the activities within that particular branch. A new great one is the Execute JavaScript activity. You need to define your input and output settings. So for the setting is where the code goes. The input setting is where you configure your input parameters, and output settings is where you configure your JavaScript outputs. And this is a great enhancement because previously, in order to do any customization within Flogo, you would have had to create an extension using Golang, right? And Golang, although popular, not everyone is familiar with Golang. So now you can actually create this within Java, create JavaScript activities and use that in those functions within your own apps. It's not yet deployable at an app level or an org level the way that extensions are, because extensions are sort of part of the core functionality. And another recent enhancement was that extensions are now shareable at the org level, not just the app level, right? So previously extensions were shared at the org level, now they're shared at the app level. So you still do have the limitation of having to store all this JavaScript within your particular activity, but it does open up a lot of new functionality that you can use. We have a new connector for WebSockets. This is both a trigger and an activity. You can create a WebSocket server as a trigger. And there are a couple modes, one where it reads the data from the WebSocket, the other it provides a trigger as an output to a WebSocket connection. And then, of course, there is the WebSocket client, where you can subscribe to a server, and then what you do is you use the WebSocket write data activity in order to write data to that existing connection. So you have a two-part, you open that connection and you write data to the connection. Pretty straightforward. Some other connector enhancements in Oracle MySQL, you can override the certificate values and the app properties. So the authority certificate, decline keys can be overwritten. The Apache Kafka and Pulsar connectors now have support for TIBCO Cloud Messaging, and TIBCO Cloud Messaging itself has an improved trigger where the output provides both a message ID and the message a number of attempts. So there's been some enhancements overall to some of these connectors. In addition to the new one for WebSockets, we have enhancements for MySQL, Kafka, Pulsar, and around messaging. Now there's also some additional. They've reorganized the GitHub for Flogo. A lot of good stuff here. So we have the breakdown of the basic concepts. We have some app development for including some REST, and then some array mapping and filtering. I really recommend you go through these, especially the array mapping, because when you think about Flogo is very much it's called TCI Develop in TCI. And the mindset of Flogo is very much centered around developers. Each activity you can think of as a function call, and it's very functionally oriented, right? There's an input, there's an output, and there's some sort of transformation that happens under the hood. Either you're pulling data, you're transforming data, you're potentially using the mapper, things like that. So understanding how that works, and then how you can stack the activities on top of each other using the arrays, the mappings, and the mapper to build additional arrays and put data together, and understanding how the subarrays work and all the sub mappings, sub loops, and things like that work is really will help you to get the most out of Flogo, I think. They put together, they've revamped all the samples, so you can see here. You can check out the page. And if we head over to that, you can see where the GitHub, all these examples, right? So they have all these new connector examples here, okay? And then we have for app development, right? Mapping arrays, all this stuff here, great, nicely documented. All the examples are here, and really good place to go through. It supplements the documentation. So for the Flogo documentation, I kind of want to give you sort of like, it sort of exists in two parts, right? There's the Flogo Enterprise is you can get the single document here under the PDF, right? And that's kind of maybe easier to search through, gives you one long document to look at. Or you can head over to TCI, TIBCO Cloud Integration, and you'll see all the information up here. Flogo Enterprise is very much like Flogo. It's just that it's self-deployed with your own containers, and it has some additional functionality that's currently not built into TCI Flogo for TIBCO Cloud, but it's pretty much the same as far as everything else goes, right? There's a couple of different connectors and a couple other functionality pieces in Enterprise that you have that you don't get with Flogo in the cloud, right? Also, we have the improved marketplace. So currently, so the marketplace is a way to distribute connectors for connectors and applications for TCI Connect and TCI Develop. In other words, Scribe and Flogo. And why do we put this together? Well, really, it's for sort of like three general people, right? We have our partners who create applications. This is a way for them to sort of get some traction. Sometimes they're implementation partners. Sometimes they're our SaaS partners, right? This is a great way for them to highlight their innovations and showcase their services, and to actually drive business for their engagements. Now, for the users, it's great because previously, if you think about the marketplace, in some way, it's not necessarily brand new functionality, because you could always go and import apps into Flogo, right? But what this does is it's a central location where all these apps are located. It's a place that you can go and you can deploy them. You can deploy them automatically to your organization, right? And you can really kind of see what other people are doing, right? It's also a great place you can provide feedback too in terms of likes and such. So for TIBCO, it's great because now we have a central place where we can put all of our apps and augment our documentation. Right? So again, discoverability, empowerment, community. Again, it's a great place for people to find this. Really gives some innovation to both our. It drives innovation really in those three peers, right? Those three pillars. Our partners internally and our users are all working together now, better together, to understand and leverage the product in a much better way. So again, there's different personas we have for the marketplace. There's the producer, and the producer is one who creates it. Could be the model could be public, or could be private it could be public, request, or private, right? And then they manage the listings, they put everything together, and then they go through an approval process. The consumer is the one that can either can download apps directly, can request the ones that are paid, or can receive other apps from other organizations. This is a great way too for you to behind the scenes be able to distribute apps between organizations, right? So now what you can do is you can send a app to another organization, and then they can receive it and deploy it to their organization without having to run through the export-import process. And now it also provides a level of versioning too. So TIBCO itself will approve these apps and work with the providers to make sure that the versioning, right? So how does it work? Well, the provider is going to submit an app via the org for Flogo extensions. Flogo extensions includes the connector types, but if using Scribe, it's you can't do that. You can't deploy connectors for Scribe in the marketplace automatically. And the reason is because Scribe is a shared environment, whereas Flogo is containerized up in TCI. And because of that, we can't run the risk of someone having a application which could negatively impact all of the users. So for the TCI Connect Scribe, we end up, there's a process, the connectors have to go through a formal development process. However, with Flogo, the extensions, which can be either extensions can act as connectors, or they can act as product extensions in terms of adding functionality, to the product, right? And so now we can deploy those within Flogo. And also, and additionally, apps can be deployed for Flogo and Scribe. Then TIBCO approves it, then the consumer is going to get the listing. There's a couple models. There's the open source model where we just sort of put stuff up there. There's a partner model where our partners are putting things up there, either in a free or a paid paradigm. And then for the support, TIBCO will provide first level support on this, but ultimately, if it is a partner who's providing this, then you're going to have to ultimately work with them in order to get the actual resolution on that. All right, so a lot of good resources for this. Again, we have the two sets of documentation for Flogo. There's the release notes for TCI that includes Flogo and Scribe. The new Flogo GitHub, improved GitHub repository. And then if you're interested in the marketplace, you can look at the documentation, both the program guide and the documentation on how to use that. All right, everybody, I do thank you for your time. Look for this up in our community, and look forward to seeing you on future sessions.